We're back. Strata Unscripted. It's Tom Beattie from OctoAI. And hello, Katharine.
Hey, I'm here. I'm actually like wiping away tears from laughing too hard at our pre-conversation here. So
Well, there you go.
we're ready to
Excellent.
go today. Yes.
And what are we going to talk about today? Because there's been a lot of things going on in our space.
There has been. It's pretty exciting. Yeah, let's dig into. I want to dig into UDI, the luncheon, the conversation between Rennie and Eby, and the opening by Mr. Illich. Um, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the conversations we heard at lunch about multiplexes and some of the zoning. What's on your agenda?
Yeah, those will be good topics for sure. I mean, I love the way that session opened because Rick Illich came to the front from Town Line and just said a whole bunch of things out loud that I think a lot of us in British Columbia have been feeling and thinking. But he did it in a way that was quite abrupt, and he knew who the guest of the honor was that day, and it was an interesting way for him to open, obviously, to what would be a receptive audience of his peers. Um, but I thought a lot of it resonated, and I was impressed by Eby's emotional
Composure.
intelligence and composure when he came up to the stage to follow it. What were your thoughts?
You know what? I didn't disagree with everything that Rick had to say, which might surprise some people. I, well, I mean, just say it. I didn't disagree with everything that he had to say. I thought he made some really great points. I didn't like how they passed it off, though. In such a hostile room, like it seemed pretty openly hostile. The room was stressed. Eby was not there among friends. I would have liked to see them let him catch his feet a little bit if they want him to be a willing participant in those conversations. We can't be owning each other all the time. And trust me, like I have to pull myself back from that a lot. I want to own so many people all the time, and I don't. um, yeah, I guess I was a little disappointed with the handoff there, but I liked the opening. I thought it was great.
We agree, and I thought that Bob did a pretty good job at acting as a host and an intermediary between the audience that he was representing, you could call it that, and his host, which or his guest, which I thought was great. I really think that he was diplomatic about many of his questions and the slant that he put on things, and clearly he sits quite centrally and I guess between some in his audience and the premier that was there to speak. So
Yeah. I loved it. You know what? He has a really fun cadence that reminded me of like a late night talk show. Like that's what we were in. It was really playful and some of the graphics, I wish I think you got some screenshots. I wish we should post those, but some of the graphics that they used during the luncheon as well were really interesting. I have to say, all
it's
in
true.
all,
We could do the
yeah,
same thing, and I could, like Bob, call for it to appear magically on the screen, but I didn't have it
seriously.
prepared, and neither did they there, and the graphic didn't come up. But the gist of that graphic was that in the 70s, there were many more taxpayers for every person that wasn't working, at like six or more, and in the next decade, that number's going to decline to less than three, and that is a concern because the burden on the taxpayer is increasing if you're expecting the same level of service. And that was the point that Bob was trying to make. And I think he was trying to also encourage us as an audience and the room of his peers to appreciate that immigration will continue to be a very important part of Canada's growth in our economy, which I believe to be true. It's the style, nature, and planning around immigration that I think needs careful thought and work.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of how it always ends up being with all policy planning. We know there's work to get done. We know we need more people to get the work done, but we're at a really unique time and place in history in BC that we can learn from so many other jurisdictions and programs that have been implemented, like pulling it back to Strata and thinking about multiplex and thinking about Strata education, things like that. At that luncheon at the table, I kept hearing like, "Oh, well, with these multiplexes, we don't need to do Strata." Oh, I've seen seen a marketing campaign out there saying goodbye strata fees. And I end up perplexed. I'm like, first of all, like, why is strata the enemy? Number one. And number two, how are you going to govern and organize these shared residents then? Because strata's not bad. It's just how we organize ourselves together in that shared space, how we, get through conflict, that kind of thing.
And is Strata going to be the ultimate result for all of these multiplexes?
Well, okay, so this also came up where it was said, oh, if you have if you have under 5 units, if you have four or less, you don't need to have strata. Just want to clarify, there are a couple exemptions in that you don't need to do a depreciation report or an electrical planning report if you have 4 units or less. Or if you're building a purpose-built rental on that single lot, those are exemptions. But if you are going to divide it up into units and sell it, that's a strata. And the Strata Property Act is, as I've said before, it's the most battle-tested piece of legislation we have to govern ourselves in buildings. We don't need to be afraid of it. We just need to understand it better, to be honest. That's what it always comes down to, is education, in my mind.
And a lot of people that don't understand it include, first-time buyers that have never lived in anything else, and
Developers, yeah.
developers, especially when they're developing something like a multiplex on what could be a single-family lot previously, and they're not used to this. What is this? When do these rules kick in? What does a developer need to know? How does that whole transition happen?
Well, and I recently saw that there's over 444 permit applications in process right now in Vancouver for new
That was a nice map.
multiplexes. Yeah, it was one, I think, from vanplex.com, and the map is literally glowing red with all the permits across Vancouver. This is coming to your backyard, people. And the people building it, the people selling it, know very little about how they're going to be organized, structured, and governed. And the people buying in, probably the same thing. So we should probably be a little bit more concerned right now at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things to be concerned about, right? Like one is the fact that they're strata and they need to be properly set up and organized for that so that they can lead a healthy life and start off on the right foot. And the other is what these things actually look like, because over the last couple of weeks, you and I have both seen the stories out of Burnaby, where they are rapidly changing the restrictions that they're placing around multiplex development in response to, well, let's call them what they are, really ugly 4-story, in some cases, like laneway homes and developments.
Well, it's because if you look at it, you have these sweet little houses next to them, and then you have this multiplex that's coming up like edge to edge. This is they're made to maximize this space, right? Like, it's going to stand out. And think about the parking. They increase that many people and all their guests. Like, there's so many things that are not being considered right now. And the article that I read was in CBC, and it came out yesterday, and it talked about how the mayor's office is making these changes because of months and such high volumes of complaints coming in from residents, basically. So it's
I
not
haven't
like,
seen all the pictures, and I'm not gonna pretend to understand the whole back story as to how that situation has evolved, because I've heard a lot of people speaking very favorably about Burnaby's legislation and their welcoming of these developments, and obviously we as a country need more homes, and there needs to be a way to handle this sort of gentle densification alongside large scale developments. But as we said in the pre-call, like there's this pendulum that swings on everything, and clearly in Burnaby, that pendulum had swung towards multiplex development, and now that they're starting to feel and see what was previously allowed, and how it's affecting neighbors and communities, the pendulum is starting to rapidly swing back the other way. And who knows how far it will go. It will probably, continue to oscillate back and forth over the next decade. But it'll be interesting to see what they land on.
well, and it'll be more interesting to me to see how the city of Vancouver learns from them, because they're our closest neighbors. They're really similar in demographic and area. and shared infrastructure. Like the highway literally goes right up between the two cities. So I think it'll be more interesting to see how we either learn or don't learn from each other too. I'm kind of leaning
I don't
to
know
the latter.
enough about their existing policies or legislation around this. Do you?
I only started looking it up because I saw these articles. I didn't even realize that Burnaby had gone through the rezoning ahead of Vancouver because I'll be honest, like I'm born and raised a Vancouver city girl. I just like stay in my little bubble a lot. So pretty wrapped up in Vancouver politics, but it was really interesting to see all of a sudden these news stories coming out in response to that zoning reform now being exercised. So, like a lot of the time, it's what's in theory, what the legislators, policymakers, developers decide that the public's going to like, and then they just do it. And then what happens in practice? Um, and I have to wonder, like, as an exercise in terms of like public input, how much that's actually weighted. Like, instead of building the strata plan documents to suit what the design is, I think with strata corporations, you should actually start with the strata plan and then build the design from there more so. That might be a different way of looking at it for developers at this point. Think about how the people are going to use the shared space first and then look at the units. Because they're not buying a unit, they're buying a fractional ownership of that entire entity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's really interesting. And education. You've mentioned education. I want to circle back to that part. So the education for the developers and those that are building these multiplexes is key. You've had some conversations with those in the
everybody.
multiplex space recently. I'm not familiar with those, but maybe you could share with everyone.
Yeah, I've been having some conversations. I recently did a webinar with Maria Kritikos called Multiplex is the Moment. And it was really great to speak to some of the other participants in that stream, including some Vancouver City councillors. And I think sometimes we come down hard on our politicians and our representatives in that they're doing the best that they can with the information they have, but more information is needed too. Because speaking with some of the people involved, they are so well intentioned, but they just don't realize what's involved. Developer clients that I've been taking on for some multiplexes, they just don't even realize what the penalties are if you don't hold your first AGM on time. Because that AGM is the handover. It's how you set up that community to take the baton and to go on and lead themselves. Like it should have a sense of occasion. It should be taken seriously. And it's usually an afterthought. And it's actually a huge liability to them. And when I tell them what the penalties are for a late AGM, I can see their eyes widen and their brains start to process, like, what else don't I know about Strata?
Can we put you on the spot
Interesting.
with then two questions? Like, first of all,
Yeah.
what's that penalty?
So if you have within the first month that it's late, it's $1,000, but then every week thereafter, it's another $1,000. You're going to hold it within 9 months of your first conveyance, your first sale, or when 50% plus one unit sells. So you have 9 months clock starting from the time you even hit your first sale, pre-sale potentially, first conveyance, clock starts. So
That was question two.
yeah,
When does that clock start? So first
yeah.
conveyance 9 months,
Yeah.
or what happens? Sorry,
Or
when half the
50%
units,
plus one. So if
and
you
then
sell
what's
them
the timeline?
fast, then you
Yeah,
have to hold it within 6 weeks of that date.
6 weeks of that 50% plus one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's just one little thing. It's not that there's a lot. I mean, there is. But in terms of hard stops for developers, it's there's not a whole lot. You just don't know what you don't know, right? You're not
Yeah.
going to dig through all the places to find all the information to understand what you're supposed to do. Bring in the big guys for that. Bring in me, bring in a strata lawyer, that kind of thing. Honestly, it's not something you need to take on yourself.
What are the other gotchas for a developer of a multiplex? Like, are they on the hook for funding something into the CRF for this
They
first
are.
budget, or?
Sometimes they forget to even set up a second account for the CRF, which I've seen, which is, yeah, definitely a red flag. So set up a second account. Your savings account has to be funded with 10%, and you have to contribute strata fees to the unsold units, including the contribution to the CRF from the time of the first conveyance. So you have to have that interim budget done at that point, ready to go. And it's going to form what, part of the documentation you're disclosing to purchasers as well. So you want to have those documents, ready for them. But it is pretty crucial because those arrears of strata fees on the developer's part are lienable amounts. And once the council takes control, they could lien your unsold units if you owe money to the strata. So you really don't want to get into that
Wow.
circumstance.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a single family homeowner who has enough lot space to add something and build a multiplex. And I'm kind of at a loss. It's like, okay, I've got my architect. I'm aware of the rules in my municipality. I designed something I think makes sense. How am I supposed to put together a budget for this?
Yeah, that's a really great question.
Yeah,
And I
I
would
mean,
love to know what the city and the province have planned for that because I haven't really seen any education around builders and multiplex development at all, right? I had submitted some curriculum to be accredited through BC Housing that was geared towards Strata 101 for multiplex developers, but they told me straight up now that's too Strata related. It's not relevant to builders. And with 444 plus applications coming through in the city of Vancouver, plus whatever numbers are in Burnaby, I beg to differ that Strata
yeah, I
is
mean, the
not
Lower
any
Mainland
builder
doesn't
related.
stop in Vancouver and Burnaby. You've got huge areas throughout Richmond, Delta, Surrey, Langley, and
Yep.
everywhere else around that will be seeing these types of applications arrive. And if you are using Vancouver as your starting base, you can safely say that across the Lower Mainland there'd be 1,000 or more of these developments coming. And again, if I'm coming in as the naive landowner who is trying to put this together, trying to address obviously the housing needs that we have, and trying to turn my home into a center of additional potential revenue or value, um, then I really need some way of understanding how I'm supposed to begin. You have a huge amount of expertise on the strata side. We at OctoAI are condo intelligence nerds. We're data people. We certainly have seen a lot of budgets for small stratas and could tell you what the average small strata budget looks like. But I don't know what's going to go into the ins and outs for any particular development in any particular community.
Yeah. And that's where it's hard, I think, for these smaller councils that are very likely going to be self managed, is knowing how to cut through the noise because there are 33 plus pieces of legislation and counting. There are 10 governing bodies and associations, many different avenues of education and resources. And they can play to different strengths. And so the hard part is being that homeowner, that developer, and knowing, okay, so like, where do I go to for this? Where do I go to for that? Like I don't want to lay it all out because I think I'd get in big trouble if I started classifying all the associations here. They wouldn't be
No, and,
very
and that's not the
but
point of this conversation. But
they all have different strengths and they all have different wheelhouses that they focus on, and just kind of learning who they all are, it can be really confusing. It can be really confusing to understand like which laws will supersede which ones, and when to bring a lawyer versus when you could probably talk to your insurer about that kind of question versus when do you just go to CHOA, when do you go here? You have no idea. It's a lot. So
a bunch of us are trying to figure out how to help people navigate and to bundle intelligence and offerings in ways that might be useful for these communities. So that's happening. And also, there's a lot of talk happening about education, not just among developers, but among those that live in these communities or on strata council.
yeah. Yeah, it's a topic for sure in the Facebook groups and Reddit threads. Looking for education for sure. You see it all
Yeah.
the time.
Um, Ontario's got some frameworks for Strata Council Condo Board member education, their equivalent. We don't yet here. There's been talk about that. Hopefully, we'll see more talk about that because it's an important subject.
I hope that there's talk too before action on this one because Ontario has a model of education, but that's about all that they can say. It's offered online. It's a click through. It was built for scale and cost. It wasn't built, for usability on the part of the everyman who is the owner of a strata. We're a very multicultural province. We're multilingual province. Maybe not officially, but like there are pockets of the province that would not benefit from having an online only, English only education system. It just is not going to be the most functional for them. So I see right now a real opportunity for some parties to collaborate and have conversations before building something. I think that's going to be the smartest. Is let's learn from what's happened first. Let's plan it out a little better. So
Yeah, and it's always nice to have case studies like this because you can identify those shortcomings and what's gone well. I mean, clearly having a fundamental knowledge of what it takes to run your community is something that I think would be valuable. I think there's a lot to be said for learning by doing. I don't use much of my education in my day-to-day life, but I apply the different learnings that I had from it. Um, and I think that if you do implement something that will help those specifically within Strata better understand the Strata Property Act, the frameworks in which they're operating, that maybe you can have them make better decisions or guide their communities to better decisions. And that's obviously a positive.
yeah, absolutely. I think too that if you're thinking about 1.5 million residents, however many stratas that there are, however many council members, there's too much work to do for one centralized online system. It's not going to achieve what we want. So it will be cool to map out a collaborative network that would work for all the different markets of BC and management of those communities. Because even looking for vendors or getting projects done in certain areas of BC and certain remote markets is going to look really different to how I would have trained a city strata manager on how to tender a project. Right. So
Yeah.
there's like, I think I get really excited when I start to think of like what the ideal state of strata education could be in BC. And I think there's so much potential for us to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What else is on our agenda for today?
I'm trying to think back to the UDI lunch. It feels like it was a little while ago now, but I really enjoyed it. It was a really fun room to be in, I have to say. It also for me was really entertaining to watch the dynamics of the room and the reactions to what's said, and then to see what's posted on LinkedIn or what's been put in the news versus how it unfolded in the room. I thought that was pretty entertaining to me. I
Yeah,
felt
I
a
mean,
little out of
obviously,
place. I wasn't wearing a business suit and I did not have a trim haircut. So, um,
well, it was in a room that I belonged in from the perspective of it being mostly filled with developers. And certainly I've seen a bunch of those in commercial real estate speak very negatively about, either the province or EB's reaction. And I think some of it might be justified, but a lot of what they say is self-serving. I think that EB admitted that they'd made a couple of kind of serious policy mistakes, which I think a lot of us would have seen as no-brainers. But um, one of them related to the policy towards drugs, and I think that kind of owning up to the fact that that was the wrong decision and the wrong path was good. Um, there are things that I think some of the developers in the room wanted Eby to address that he can't. They're federal jurisdiction. Immigration is not something that Eby gets to control. The provinces must work with the feds to try and get a good outcome there. And I think the overall reading that room and others, my sense is we do not need um, degree mills and fast food workers in this country. We need skilled workers that can help us with a whole range of different needs within our system. And that, yes, it includes construction and development. It includes healthcare. It includes education. It includes technology. It includes all sorts of skills. And we really need to optimize our immigration. And we've got a great opportunity with America making it more difficult for many to enter the US to attract them here, where you do not maybe have the same earnings potential and your housing is more expensive, but you can build yourself a really wonderful life and raise a family and build a future. And I think that that's something that I hope that we can capitalize on, and something that I heard Eby say he was going to be continuing to work with other levels of government to achieve. And that's a positive.
I agree. And I mean, I wouldn't still be here living in a 530 square foot apartment if I didn't think Vancouver is pretty special. It is worth it. But there's definitely some things that need to change. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, there's
I
a lot
think
that
it
needs
was
to change.
surprising to hear a politician openly say we made a mistake with decriminalizing drug use, and we're working to fix this. To actually hear a politician say, like, we made a mistake openly and here's what we're doing to be accountable, I think that takes a lot of courage nowadays too. So
Yeah, but I
I'm
mean, it was
excited
so
to see what
obviously the wrong decision at the
how
outset that
many
I'm
times have
shocked that
you
we went down
seen
that path.
powerful people make mistakes and then double down, and even if it seemed obvious, because I've seen it a lot. So
Oh,
it, to
yeah.
me,
Yeah.
is some more surprising to see him own up to it than to double down.
Yes, I wish that we would have more at other levels of government own up to things and course correct faster, because the ramifications of some decisions that have been doubled down on have been very detrimental to our economy and our people.
I don't like when I see people doubling down too, where they really know better, or they were warned. Like, there's been some implementation of some education or some initiatives in the strata world, like one being some of the the emissions reporting through the city of Vancouver as it relates to strata properties. And, they rolled out training that, would scare a lot of stratas and strata managers right off the bat. And going into the going into a meeting with them and sharing my feedback, it turns out that they had that feedback from other colleagues for months and months. And I think it's sometimes hard for someone in my position that has so much passion for wanting to improve the industry to see where policymakers could listen to pragmatic advice and could reasonably follow it without too much hassle, actually. Um, and then them choosing not to. So, like, that to me is really hard
Yeah.
and super annoying. So,
I mean, I've spoken
yeah.
to a couple of people in that space about this issue, because we do have a lot of intelligence around buildings. It doesn't exactly meet what they're looking for, and I tend to feel like they should be able to cobble this data together without putting the onus onto strata councils. Um, like there are sources of data around energy consumption, electricity, gas. Like you could compile that with what you have on file at the city in terms of their strata plans to do some of these calculations and take it off of strata's plates. Like, it kind of drives me nuts to see the continual drip feed of new rules and new requirements. So, we had
Same with EV
EV ready
charging. Think
plans.
about that. Oh, you're just saying EV ready plans. Like, literally, there's this whole thing now that's like all the targets aren't being hit. And it's well because like half the stratas in BC are so under maintained. They don't have money for their roofs, yet you want them to spend however many hundreds of $1,000s of on electrical upgrades and EV charging. Like, no, they need to do their piping first. And it
Yes.
doesn't the
and
reality
and
on
the
the ground is
constant
not being
drip
listened to.
feed of requirements. Like, you had your EV ready plan, and then you've got these other electrical planning reports. And it's like, oh, it's not the same thing. So you have to spend another X on your next report, all kind of back on the same theme as what you've done before. And what I'm really happy about is the 5-year cycle for depreciation reports. I think that
That's
is
smart.
a major step forward. I think that
Yep.
people should have an understanding in their communities about the remaining asset life of kind of core common assets, and a reasonable expectation of what their replacement costs are going to be if and when they need that upgrade, they need that replacement. And they're not magical studies that are going to give you concrete answers. They're not crystal balls, but the engineers that are putting those together have a very good understanding of the life and costs, and are able to give you a reasonable expectation. And you can maintain your roof well and get another 5 years out of it. And that's great because it will defer that larger capital cost in exchange for some maintenance along the way. But
I'm
having
glad they're
that,
mandatory
um,
now for
yeah,
sure. Like,
it is, because
honestly,
we still see them from 2013. There were some buildings that claimed not to have a depreciation report. Big buildings, buildings with more than 100 units,
okay, but
and
at
yet,
that point, what are you running away from? Because like I've heard councils say this to me when I was in active portfolios where they would say, "Oh, we don't want to get it because then our price, our insurance is going to go up or this is going to go up." And I'm like, if it was going to go up, the risk was always there. You were just transferring it on to different people, aka yourselves as a group. So like
yeah, yourselves or to your insurer or to
yeah,
others. It's
you're
the
not
ostrich
running, you're
approach
not
to
winning.
leadership
Yeah.
is not a good one.
Like I
You
even
know, you really
recommend
do.
to depreciate to strata lot council or sorry strata councils under 4 units and under to get one. You don't have any requirement to renew it or even to get it at all. So you can even tell the engineering firm, make it the most basic. We just want one funding model. We don't need to do a full XYZ. We just want you to do it for like half the price, right? Because we want an inventory and a basic plan. They'll do that kind of stuff for you. I've talked to vendors about this, and they absolutely would be willing to tailor something. And you're not required to update it. So, FYI,
That's
small
interesting. You know,
multiplexes
if
do
you
it anyways.
for I guess a few $1,000s, you could get a much clearer sense of where things are going
And
to
then you
be in
can
your
build a
community over
proper
the next 2 or 3
maintenance
years.
schedule using the
Yeah.
depreciation report. Like people are not looking at it. It's not just like a mortgage tool. It's also how you then build your maintenance schedule and look at the cycles that you have to do things. Like it, yeah. Whenever I get a building that doesn't have it done, I am so disappointed as a strata manager. Because I'm like, okay, great. Well, there was my whole roadmap. And now I have to dig into 53 different files from six different brokerages and maybe have to order documents from die in Durham. And oh my gosh, this is going to be so annoying, right? At least the depreciation report is like the basic snapshot of information all in one place, um,
Yeah.
from a neutral perspective as much as you can be.
Yeah, as much as you can. And as we heard when I spoke to Jonathan from Reserve Sense, you do get different perspectives. It is an iterative exercise. It is something that does go to strata council and that gets discussed. And if you're lucky, you get an engineer that's thorough, that has not overlooked any common assets. Um, and you can have those conversations to make sure that you're doing it well. But I think it would be useful. Yeah, even in smaller communities, I can see them definitely not doing it at the same frequency, which makes sense. You've only got 4
If it
units,
was my
3
wish
units.
list, like every council should have a depreciation report and an EPR. Yeah, but then they also should have fully legally reviewed bylaws, legally created indemnity that's personal to their building, and a privacy policy. So, like, that's my wish list. And maybe if you're 4 units and under, start with the bylaws and not the depreciation report, sure. But eventually, every strata in my mind should have all those 5 things. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point. Excellent. Well, I mean, I think we've covered the topics of the UDI and a little bit of multiplex. Is there
A
anything
little
else
bit.
you wanted to cover today?
Yeah, I'm going to dig into multiplex in an article too. So, and I have a really great white paper with Burke by Burke that's all about. So you want a building multiplex. So there's some other resources out there. Um, we talked about maybe doing another session on bylaws and bylaw infraction nightmares in the future. So I would love to put it out to the LinkedIn, YouTube verse to DM us your strata bylaw enforcement stories. Keep them confidential, redact the details, make sure that they're not identifiable. I do not need the BCFSA getting mad at me, and neither does Tom. But we would love to dig into that. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good thought.
Yeah.
And we have had a couple of questions come up asking whether we were speaking about Bob Rennie. Yes, it was Bob Rennie who hosted David Eby at the UDI lunch last month. And another nice link to some of the rules around Burnaby and their multiplex changes. So I'll let everyone catch those online. How should they get their hands on your multiplex guide, Katharine?
Multiplex guide you can actually find on the Burke by Burke website under the multiplex link. And if you'd like to work with me, I do offer a multiplex startup package. It's 9 months worth of consulting, and I help you with your interim budget, your first AGM, first council meeting, all that stuff. So if you want that translator between all the tools, all the legislation, someone who is your coach that's going to keep you from going offside through that process, that's what I do. And I love it. I'm the biggest Strata nerd you're ever going to find, I swear. So reach out if you need some help, but there's lots of resources online. When you look through them and you're still confused, you get to call me.
Perfect. Thanks, Katharine. We'll speak to you again on Strata Unscripted next time.